Hello, exhausted students! Welcome to the official first episode of Top 10 and AP World History with Wanda, the Wandering Bear. In these episodes, we will discuss the top 10 events, people, and social, political, and cultural factors for each unit. So let's talk about Unit 2 today. So let's go through the top 10 events in no particular order based on importance. The first major event is the rise in empires. In this period, major classical empires started to rise. Some prominent examples include the Maurya and Gupta empires of India, Athens and Sparta, the Qin and Han empires in China, and the Roman Empire. We will discuss each individually in the next section, but all of these empires shared some major characteristics. Religious and belief systems formed and changed, political entities were created, and trade expanded. These characteristics, which are also the guidelines of the key concepts, help shape the different foundations of these empires. The second major event is the expansion of empires. These major empires expanded their territory and influence usually through military conquest. Major things like religion and cultural beliefs started to spread and shape a myriad of lives socially and economically. The expansion of empires also led to their downfall, which will be discussed later. The third major event is the expansion of trade routes. Some major trade routes include Silk roads, Saharan cave routes, Indian Ocean sea lanes, and Mediterranean sea lanes. These trade routes led to cultural, agriculture, and technological diffusion further than an empire's territory could reach. A negative factor that diffused was disease, which will help with the eventual collapse of many of these empires. The fourth major event is conflict and wars. Empires built strong militaries to help defend them from enemies as well as manage a large group of people. Furthermore, with the strengthening of militaries, technology innovated. Walls surrounded some cities to add extra strength. Military might grew as the empire recruited soldiers from locals or people they have conquered. The fifth major event is the creation of bureaucracy and government. To organize their people, empires started to form a governing body. These bureaucracies would have centralized power that would have diplomacy and used a range of methods to govern their people. Bureaucracies also helped support trade, leading to the diffusion of technologies, cultures, and religions. The sixth major event is experimenting with government. You may have heard about this small thing called democracy. In fact, you may even live in one. So, where did the democratic system come from? Well, it started in Greece when a lovely idea called listening to the people you govern was introduced. Even though this makes Greeks sound great, the democracy they had isn't really the democracy we see today. For example, only free men could work in political affairs, leaving out, well, everyone else. Even so, the democracy is remarkable for its time, and it continued to grow through Solon, who we will talk about later. The seventh major event is the Peloponnesian War. This was a very tense and cruel civil war between the Spartans and Greeks. The Spartans were eventually victorious in 404 BCE, but conflict still happened afterwards. Because of this war, though, Athens became known as cruel and heartless. They wanted obedience from communities, and if the community didn't give Athens obedience, then harsh punishments would follow. For instance, males didn't acknowledge Athens as a power, and as a result, the men who were old enough to join the army were executed, and the women and children were sold into slavery. This cruelty ended Athens' reputation as a striver for morality and intelligence, which led to the rise of the kingdom of Macedon, and ultimately led to Alexander of Macedon, who you may know as Alexander the Great. The eighth major event is the start of important religions and belief systems. Throughout this unit, religion comes up often. It's so important it has its own key concept, and it's the first one. In this time period, a lot of religions got their start, and they were influential to the government and people. Different religions brought different ways of living socially and politically, like Hinduism brought the caste system, Confucianism brought filial piety, and Buddhism and Christianity brought monasticism. Greek and Roman philosophies and religions emphasized on logic and science. These religions were also influential to the art and architecture scene in the cities. These religions spread through merchants and empires conquering more land, therefore affecting more regions and people. The ninth major event is Pax Romana. Pax Romana was a time of peace in the Roman community. Now, you may be wondering why a time of peace is so significant, and the answer is because of the peacefulness. The peace brought economic, technological, and cultural prosperity. The Romans built a vast system of roads and one major building, the Pantheon. This period also had major literature written. Another influential success of this period was the growth of trade, which led to a diffusion of Roman culture, religion, and technology. The 10th major event is the fall of the empires. Eventually, all empires collapsed through a variety of internal and external problems. So, what were these? Well, ironically, the success of these empires may have been their downfall. Pushing the boundaries outward and expanding the empire created new problems, like lack of resources and deterioration of government. The empires could not handle these problems, leading to their collapse. Those are just internal problems though. The outside brought a whole bunch of other problems too, like attack from other groups, for example, the Huns. Diseases from the outside trade networks also took a toll on the population and empire. These classical empires all mostly collapsed, but achievements made by them are phenomenal, and it'll become influential to later empires, and it's still influential even to today's society. Now let's introduce the top 10 people and groups of this unit. The first major person/group is the Mauryan and Gupta empires. The Mauryan and Gupta empires are the two classical empires in India. The Mauryan Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya, was the temporary unifying force of India after Alexander the Great left. Buddhism was a major religion in this period, and one ruler, Ashoka, who will be talked about later, was important in spreading Buddhism throughout the state and other regions. The other major empire, Gupta, was founded by Chandragupta, not to be confused with Chandragupta Maurya.
There's the Gupta Empire, not Chandragupta, just Gupta. First name Chandra, the first.
It was a Hindu society, which also brought the caste system. The Gupta Empire also used theater state techniques, in which they built impressive buildings like palaces and courts to almost pretend that they were an intact empire and to disguise their downfall. The Gupta Empire eventually fell due to their interior problems and attack from the Huns. The second major person/group is the Spartans. The Spartans were a Greek group that were very strict and militarized in response to the outnumbering population of the helots, which are servants, but not slaves, of the state who performed their agricultural duties. Both men and women went through intense physical training, and the majority of men served in the military. Women were encouraged to be physically strong in hopes of birthing strong children. The third major person/group is the Greeks. Greece did not really have a centralized government, but they did have polis, or the center of city-states. A major part of Greece was Athens. They have many lasting cultural effects. The overall society was logical and placed importance in education. Major philosophers came from the Greeks. Athens let free men have a political voice, which was the democracy we talked about. Slavery was widely practiced in Athens, and there is a noticeable patriarchy. Compared to Spartan society, women were treated as well. The fourth major person/group is Qin and Han China. The Qin dynasty, governed by Shi Huangdi, who is seen as the first emperor, brought a centralized government to China and led the creation of the Great Wall. Qin dynasty also established common law, currency, roads, language, and even a measuring system. However, the Qin didn't tolerate critics as they were often executed or exiled. In the end, the Qin fell and the Han dynasty took over. The Han dynasty was not as strict as Qin. They were primarily dominated by Confucian values as it was endorsed by the emperor Han Wudi. He wanted an educated class for his government, and there were Confucian exams that these scholars took to gain a position. The Han dynasty is known as a golden age that brought success from trade and technological innovations like paper, silk, and the calendar. However, it fell because of social and economic problems like the growing wealth gap between the rich and the poor, and also outside attacks. The fifth major person/group is the Roman Republic and the Empire. Rome had two major eras, the Republic and the Empire. The Republic era was dominated by aristocrats and had a powerful Senate with two other consuls with members from the Senate. The Empire was not based on heredity, and the ruler was typically chosen by the previous owner even though it was technically supposed to be chosen by the Senate. There were inequalities between men and women and a clear social hierarchy. Your position was dependent on your land ownership. In this empire, there were many cultural developments. They had excellent architecture and engineering with amazing monuments. They had Greek-influenced arts, and Christianity was developed in this era, but will only become influential after. The sixth major person/group is Ashoka. Ashoka Maurya was one of the last empires in the Mauryan Empire. He conquered territory brutally, however, he turned to a more peaceful lifestyle through Buddhism and was an important promoter of it. He was overall a decent ruler with an organized bureaucracy. The seventh major person/group is Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama is a Buddha and founder of Buddhism. He wanted to find the reason for suffering and came up with the Dharma, which contains the Four Noble Truths and the end goal of nirvana, a personal salvation. Buddhism was appealing to the lower class as it didn't enforce a strict caste system, and the monks and missionaries were effective at spreading the message. The eighth major person/group is Alexander the Great. Alexander of Macedon, or Alexander the Great, was a, get this, great military leader with a disciplined army and well-developed skills. He conquered many regions such as Egypt and Mesopotamia. Being a fan of Greek culture, he also diffused Greek influence all over his captured regions. He even conquered the much larger Persian empires and declared himself as a ruler, but he died shortly after his major conquests without establishing a government for his conquered land. The ninth major person/group is Kongfuzi. Kongfuzi, or Confucius, was the creator of Confucianism. Confucianism was influential to Han China and emphasized on filial piety. Confucius emphasized loyalty and obedience to his family and higher-ups. His popular quote is the golden rule: do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. The 10th major person/group is Solon. Solon helped reinforce democracy in Athens. He led the common class into the Athenian castle and even paid for their salaries later on. Solon seemed to want harmony between social classes as he let the wealthy keep their land but also demolished the debt of the poor. He brought up the idea of having rights protected by law, which can be seen today. He helped develop the foundation for democracy not only for Greece, but for other democracies as well. Let's talk about the top 10 social, political, and cultural factors. The first major factor is official political systems and government. With the organization of government, large masses of people could be governed. This led to major systems implemented to keep society in order, such as currency, legal codes, militaries, and social hierarchies. Governments and empires also organized trade, which helped diffuse technology, culture, and religion. The second major factor is religious belief systems and its influence. Religious and belief systems are influential characteristics for classical empires. Major religions include Christianity, Judaism, Confucianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, and legalism, and all of them brought different ideas of life and truth. They also emphasize on social hierarchy and patriarchy. The third major factor is militaries and armies. With new militaries, new lands could be conquered, and conquered lands could be controlled. Militaries also encouraged technological innovations, and the Romans even tested out new ways to govern a military and conquer land. However, keeping a military is expensive and did contribute to the downfall of some of these empires. The fourth major factor is transportation innovations. Transportation innovations were important for having long-distance communications and trade. Examples of land transportation innovations are the use of horses and camels. Maritime transportations also became useful for trade, especially in the Indian Ocean. The fifth major factor is architecture. Architecture was a symbol of religion and culture. When religions and cultures diffused, the architecture for the respective religions and cultures often did too. The architecture helped emphasize religion and cultures, worship places became important for the followers. The sixth major factor is trade. Different cultures, religions, and technologies were able to spread. Empires promoted trade, and a common theme that you will see is that empires fluctuated with the growth and decline of trade. In other words, if the empires was prosperous, then trade was good. Trade also encouraged systems like creating currency and roads. The seventh major factor is creation of cities. Major capitals formed with empires. centralizing power and becoming an economic and social symbol. These cities were hubs for trade and encouraged economic growth. Xi'an in China was considered the most advanced city in the era. The eighth major factor is patriarchal systems. Patriarchy, enforced by religion and government, was prevalent in this era in varying degrees. Some societies had a greater distinction between the powers of men and women, while others had less of a distinction. Patriarchy affected the roles men and women could do in society and typically made women inferior. The ninth major factor is social hierarchy. Different forms of social hierarchies shape societies. In Hinduism, caste systems dominated society with an emphasis on fulfilling your role as a member of the level of caste you're in. There was limited social mobility. Another major form of social hierarchy was in Rome. The partitions were separated from the plebeians, and a middle class of merchants was created. Social hierarchies could lead to some empires' downfall if the gap between the rich and the poor grew too big. The 10th major factor is written language. An organized written language helped organize the empire officially. With a written language, records can be kept of events, budgets, and other activities. A written language can also be a sign of unification in an empire with a variety of different groups. Even though all the sophisticated classical empires eventually fell, 'tis not the end of the world because their accomplishments live on. Thank you for watching! Don't forget to try to get enough sleep, and hey, while you're at it, drink some water too. See you next time on the day the project is due at 11:59 p.m. Goodbye!